Hello, good morning everybody. Welcome to this week's assembly, and today we're going to be thinking about one of my favourite topics in the whole world. A really interesting one for me today, and I'm going to start by showing you the picture that's been in the news this week which made me think about this topic.
This is my team here in the tent. Hello. It was super cold, and every step we climbed was an effort. So, when we get to the summit, what we did was just 10 meters before the summit, we whole team stopped together, and we sing the national anthem of Nepal, and we made it to the summit together. So I think that was a really historical moment. Some of the, obviously, team members were very emotional as well, including myself. To make this impossible possible together as a whole team was quite unique. All 13 8,000-meter peak were climbed by, of course, our foreign international, climbing friends. But just to bring the last one, the hardest and the most challenging peak, to Nepal and for the climbing community, I think it's really humbling for everybody else. And I think everybody respect that. Every other climbers around the world, I think they're very happy from their heart as well. So which is a great thing. Climbing in winter, K2 is super steep. Either you have to go through, blue ice or a rock. So it's very technical. On top of that, if you add, the temperature up to, minus 65 degrees, even minus 70, and you are climbing. And of course, it's on, a high altitude. But I think what it kept everybody going, was everybody wanted this to their bone. Everybody wanted to make the climbing community proud. Everybody wanted to make, the Nepalese climbing community proud. So, yeah, I think it was that mutual support between each other, that, kept us, successful.
So that video showed us some of the climbers who got to the top of the mountain K2. First of all, I suppose we should clarify what a mountain is. What's the difference between a mountain and a hill or anything else? Well, anything that you have to climb up, you would call a hill. But hills only go up to a certain height, and then once they're over a certain height, they're classed as a mountain. So mountains are really tall hills. Let's find out a bit about K2. K2 is found on the border between China and Pakistan, which is in the continent of Asia. It's the second highest mountain in the world, and it is 8,611 metres high. It's known as the Savage Mountain because it is very hard to climb, and a lot of people think it's harder to climb than Mount Everest, which is a little bit taller and the highest mountain in the world. And those 10 climbers that we just saw on the video were the first to ever reach the summit of K2 in winter. One of the reasons that this is so difficult is that temperatures can drop to minus 62 degrees centigrade. I was trying to think about what that would feel like. I think the coldest temperature I've ever been is about minus 10. The coldest we ever get in Bournemouth is probably about minus 3, 4, 5 degrees. We don't get it much colder than that very often at all. When it snows, it's normally around about freezing. So, and when it's hot, it will be about 20 degrees. That's a difference of 20 degrees between our hottest days and our coldest days in Bournemouth. And yet minus 62 is 3 times that 20 degrees difference. I can't imagine how cold that is. So people have been trying, as I said, for the last 20 years to climb K2 in winter, and the highest that anyone had ever got is 7,650 metres. On this successful attempt, the final day of climbing took the group 16 hours, and the whole team waited together below the summit before going to the top together. Here's a sort of picture which shows how you get up K2. The route that they used is called the Abruzzi Spur, and they would start down at base camp, down at the bottom of the mountain here. And then they would be able to climb reasonably quickly to Camp 1, which is around here, and then Camp 2, Camp 3, and then up along the shoulder of the mountain here to Camp 4, before going for the top and up to the summit. And as I say, in that final ascent, the final day of climbing took about 16 hours to get up there. That gives you a feel of how big the mountain is. And at the start, I said it's the second highest mountain in the world. Mount Everest is also in Asia. It's located in the Himalayan mountain range between Nepal and Tibet. And that's the highest mountain in the world. Mount Everest is 8,848 metres high, and it was named after Sir George Everest, who was a British surveyor and geographer. He made maps and surveyed parts of the world. On average, it takes 2 months to climb Mount Everest. So it's not the sort of thing, often when I go and climb a mountain, I will do it in a day. But to do Mount Everest takes 2 months. Somebody first got to the top of Mount Everest in 1953, and the average temperature on top of Everest is minus 37 degrees, which, as I say, that's probably about 4 times colder than any temperature I've ever experienced in my life anywhere in the world. It is unbelievably cold at the top of these mountains. I said at the start of this assembly, it was one of my favourite things, climbing mountains. It's something that I do as a hobby whenever I can. Here's my 2 boys at the top of Pen y Fan in Wales. Pen y Fan is the highest mountain in southern Wales. It's not as tall, it's not the highest mountain in Wales, and it's not very tall. It's only 886 metres. Now, when we were just talking about Mount Everest, we were talking about 8,000 metres. So we are talking about a huge difference in size between the different mountains. Here's me on top of Pen y Fan in the winter when it was snowing, and so that was on a different occasion, but the same mountain. This is me in the Lake District, which is an area in the north of England, one of my favourite places to climb mountains. And it was also a day that was a little bit snowy, not too bad. And this is the view from the top of Mount Snowdon, which is the highest mountain in Wales. This was the view on a day that I climbed it. You can probably tell this was a sunny summer's day, although it would still be cold at the top of a mountain, even in summer. Not as cold as it is in winter, but it would still be colder because every 100 metres you go up, it gets cooler by about 1 degree centigrade. So if you go up an 800 metre mountain, it will often be about 8 degrees cooler than it would be if you were at the beach at sea level. I tried to get something to give you a bit of a sense of how different the mountains in this country are to the mountains in Asia. Ben Nevis is the highest mountain in the United Kingdom. It's in Scotland. It's higher than any mountain in England, Wales or Ireland or Scotland. It's the biggest mountain that we've got in this country, and it's 1,344 metres. So it's still about 6 times smaller than Mount Everest, and you can see that in this picture. It looks like a tiny little hill when you compare it to the height of Everest. So when people choose to go up a high mountain, particularly in winter conditions, they'll need lots of special equipment. You can see these gentlemen wearing helmets. They're carrying a rope. That's because it can be very steep or slippy, and so sometimes they will need to be roped to each other, or they will need to attach themselves to the mountain to stop themselves from falling. They're also carrying lots of climbing gear here. These are ice screws and things that they will screw into rock or ice so that if they do fall, they don't fall all the way down the mountain or seriously hurt themselves. One of the most significant bits of equipment they need is clothing that is warm enough to take them to allow them to survive in such cold temperatures. So the sorts of clothes that they're wearing are not like anything that we ever wear at home. They're much, much thicker. They will have many more layers, and they will keep them much, much warmer to allow them to keep going in temperatures that might go down as low as minus 60 degrees centigrade. If we have a little look at this, this is some of the stuff that a mountaineer might need. And on an expedition like the one to K2, some of the things would be put in place. So the reason that it showed base camps on those maps is some things like the tents and cooking equipment and so on will be left on the mountain so that people can use it, so they don't have to carry it themselves. Because going up these mountains is very, very difficult. Apart from anything else, there's much less oxygen in the air, so it's much harder to breathe as you go higher and higher. So if you're carrying a lot of stuff, it makes it an awful lot more difficult. So things will be left at base camps to reduce the amount that you have to carry, but you still need an awful lot of stuff with you. So you would need a tent in case you can't make it to a base camp. So they would always be carrying a tent so that they got some shelter if they needed it. They would be wearing probably a harness, which is worn around their waist and legs, and that's what they use to clip themselves onto the mountain. These clips would be used to attach themselves to the mountain to stop them from falling off. They would have a rucksack with all their stuff in. This is a GPS, so something that tells them where they are, a navigation system. They would probably carry 2 ice axes, one for each hand. These have a sharp point at this end so that you can dig it into the ground to stop you from slipping. And they would also have the axe end, which you can put into ice or snow to stop you from slipping or to help you to climb. These boots are totally rigid and there to help you climb. You'd put these crampons on the bottom of the boots to give you grip, so they stick into ice to stop you from slipping. You'd have the rope to attach yourself to your partner. This is an avalanche indicator, so if you were caught in snow, people would be able to find you. You would need some special goggles because the sun is a lot stronger on your eyes at altitude, and so you need some special goggles to stop your eyes from being damaged. Then you need the stuff to eat, so you need a stove and something to cook food in and something to eat it with, something to light the stove with, and this is an anchor to stop you again slipping, and you might need a snow shovel and a first aid kit, and this is a sleeping bag for you to get into if you have to stay overnight as you're travelling from one part of the mountain to another. So you need an awful lot of equipment, and that's why they have base camps as well, to reduce the amount of equipment that you need, but you still have to carry an awful lot of equipment whilst you're climbing. At the start of assembly, we asked the question about why do people climb mountains? It's a very dangerous thing to do. And some people say, surely it's too dangerous, too risky a thing to do. Why would people do that? And so I thought we'd have a look at some of the famous people who have climbed mountains. This is Arunima from India. She conquered Mount Everest, which is, as we said, the highest mountain. And the reason that she's well known for this is that she has only got one leg. So she was one of the first people to climb the highest mountains with a prosthetic leg. Joe Simpson is a British mountaineer. He's very well known because back in 1985, he was trying to climb a mountain called Sula Grande. And as he was coming down the mountain, he fell through a crevasse and he suffered some serious injuries. And he was thought to be lost. They thought that he died on the mountain. And so he was left on the mountain and he'd injured himself very badly and he had to crawl back down the mountain. So he's very well known because he had a very nasty experience on a mountain. Jordan Romero is known at the moment for being the youngest person to ever climb Mount Everest. He climbed it when he was just under 14 years old, and that was back in 2010. And then this is Wanda, who is a Polish mountain climber. She became the first woman to reach the summit of K2 in 1986. And she was also the third woman to get to the top of Everest. Unfortunately, she's not alive anymore. She died in an accident on a mountain called Kanchenjunga. So you can see from that there's somebody who died on a mountain, somebody who's been seriously injured on a mountain, somebody who's only got one leg. You can see that this is a very, very dangerous sport. And so people do question why people would do it, but some people really enjoy a thrill of doing something which is dangerous, but equally, which gives you a huge sense of achievement. And they get to see parts of the world that most people don't ever get to see. And so there are lots of reasons why they enjoy mountaineering. Joe Simpson actually said that it's a little bit addictive doing things like this. So once you've done one thing, you want to go on and do something that's more difficult or more challenging. And it's like a competition with yourself to try and achieve something more difficult each time you go mountaineering. So it's a tricky thing because some people disagree with mountaineering whilst other people absolutely love it as a sport. So, as I said, I absolutely love climbing mountains. Although the mountains that I've climbed are nothing like as high as some of the mountains that we've talked about today, like K2 and Mount Everest. And because they're not as high, they're not as dangerous. But some people enjoy climbing the very highest mountains in the world. And other people criticise them for that because they say it's too dangerous and too risky and the people are being selfish. But the people who do it enjoy it and they find it a challenge. And this reminds us of the British value of individual liberty. Remember, individual liberty is our own right to make our own choices. And at different times in our lives, we might choose to challenge ourselves or to try something which we want to try and do. And when we do, we have a responsibility to manage the risks and to understand the consequences of our actions and to get a good balance between doing something we want to do and to challenge ourselves, but also to be aware of the risks and to manage those risks and the consequences of our actions. Now, sometimes when we talk about facing mountains, we don't actually mean climbing real mountains. Sometimes when we face a mountain, it means we face a challenge. We use it as a metaphor for finding something that we find difficult. And you, as a child, can face many different mountains. You might face the mountain of speaking a different language, or you might find something difficult because of your personal circumstances or situation. And one of the UN rights of the child is that regardless of their individual circumstances, no child should be treated unfairly. And it's important to remember that when we think about things like this that we've talked about today, where people will have different viewpoints. Some people love climbing mountains and some people think it's too dangerous and people shouldn't do it. And we should treat everybody fairly and reasonably and respect their independent views.